Hello friends, welcome to This American Girl Reads. My name is Kirsten, and today I'm going to be doing two different things at the same time. The first is that I am going to be dressing some of my historical dolls for Pride Month. I myself am queer, and so I really like to celebrate Pride Month every year in some fashion, and usually I don't get my dolls into the act because I'm really busy, and the idea of changing all of them for Pride was just a little overwhelming, and so I decided to just focus on 7 of my historical characters and getting them dressed to represent the rainbow for Pride. So that is the first thing I'm going to be doing, is dressing my dolls on camera. The second thing I'm going to be doing is I wrote a little tag that I'm just calling the historical character tag. And each historical character has a question that is in some way connected to their character or their stories. And the questions are a mix of personal questions, questions about your collection, and questions about American Girl as a whole. I don't know, I got bored, I threw it together. I'll put the questions in the ones that I put together in the comments below in case you want to do it, but I suspect no one would. But if you do, I only did the first 8 released characters. I did it by order of release. And so there's room for people to add in more questions connected to another historical doll as they go, if you want, should you so desire. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get this started because I suspect it might be a longer video. Big shock. The first doll I'm going to dress is Kirsten, who is currently largely in her meet outfit. Not entirely. Her ribbons are from her school outfit, and the boots are from the re-release of her birthday outfit. I really hate Kirsten's meet boots, and so I avoid putting them on her as much as possible. So I'm going to get her changed into her school outfit minus the shawl because Kirsten here is going to be red for the rainbow. All right, and the first question in this little dorky tag that I made up for funsies because I got bored is Molly. And Molly's question is, what doll or object, what is something that is absent from your collection? And by this I don't mean like who's your grail doll per se, although you can certainly interpret it that way if you want. But it's more like, you know, what is the doll that would fill the void in your collection, or the item that might fill a void in your collection? And so my answer to this one, because I'm filming this on May 26th, is right now is definitely number 132, who is, her number's just been released. It's been kind of leaked by American Girl in some ways, because I already have a full story for her. I'm going to name her Billy, and she's going to be the twin sister of my custom pink Stardust holiday doll, Simone. And so because I have a full story for her and like I'm really excited to incorporate her into my world, it's just kind of, she's just kind of absent right now. And whenever I think about like, oh, I want to take this photo, you know, with Simone, there's always a part of me that's like, okay, but wouldn't it be even better if Billy was involved in the photo too? And then I'm like, oh wait, but I don't have Billy. So that would be one gap in my collection. And then another gap in my collection is that of my modern dolls, which are the ones that you can mostly see right here, who kind of make up my modern world and my kind of extension of the World by Us line. I have a lot of different dolls that represent a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different features. And it occurred to me this year, I don't have a blonde. Like, none of my modern dolls are blonde. And so I actually have been starting to work on developing a character so that I can, at some point, add a blonde doll to the World by Us extension line so that that is kind of represented. I don't have a lot of blondes in my collection to begin with. Kirsten is one of my few. Kirsten, Kit, Caroline. I think those are my only like true blondes in my entire collection. So I would like to add a blonde to my World by Us line, just so that I have at least one blonde doll represented in an otherwise very black and brown hair set. All right, so here is Kirsten in her school outfit. My Kirsten has a little bit of bubble eye, but she's still very pretty. And again, I'm not going to put the shawl on just because that way this stays a red outfit. I mean, I have some other outfits that are going to go into this rainbow that are stretching the limits of their color. So she at least can stay very red. So starting off the rainbow, we have Kirsten. Next up, we have Josefina, who will be wearing her summer outfit to represent orange. She's currently in her harvest outfit, which I got secondhand. And of note, the elastic on her camisa here is actually completely shot. Like it's huge, it's puffy. So I actually just threw like some clear elastics around the ends to help create some of that puff feel that this camisa is supposed to have without having to figure out how to sew elastic, because I don't know how to do that. All right, so I'm gonna start working on getting Josefina here changed. And then the next question in the historical character tag is Kirsten. How ironic that, I did Kirsten first for Molly and, oops, whatever. I was trying to go in rough chronological order of when the dolls were released. So Kirsten's question is more of a personal question. And that is, what languages do you know? How did you learn them? And was it easy? Was it difficult? What is the story behind your language learning? So I know American Sign Language, not well anymore, but I took 2 years of it in high school. I went to an arts high school, and all of our languages had to relate to the arts in some way. So we had Italian for music, we had French for dance, and then we had American Sign Language for theater, because interpreting in theater is its own art form, as well as making theater accessible for people. So that is where I learned ASL. And I was fluent for a while when I was younger, but I don't use it as often anymore. And so I can parse it a lot of the times. I can have an awkward conversation, but it's not going to look pretty anymore. My best friend from high school, who is, still my best friend today, she is an ASL interpreter. It's actually, ironically, how I kind of know Christy from AG Takes Over is because I was watching her videos and she mentioned that she was an ASL interpreter in Central Ohio. And I'm like, it can't be a huge community. People probably know each other. And it turns out she does know my best friend. So that was my first language that other than English that I learned. And then I took French in college for a year because, like many places, language, I went to a liberal arts college, and learning a language was a requirement. And I'm terrible at French. I never felt comfortable. I never felt confident. I would not consider myself a French speaker at all. Languages, ASL worked really well in my brain. I learned ASL fairly easily, and I was fairly skilled at it for a time in my life. French, I don't know why, it never took. It was so awkward. I would understand what was being asked of me in class, but I would automatically answer questions in ASL rather than French. Taking French was when I learned for the first time that I really don't know what grammar is. I know how to put a sentence together, and I know how to put together an artful sentence, but I don't know the names and the language associated with grammar. So, we'd be learning about how to conjugate verbs, and I'd be like, I don't know what that means. and also which part of speech is a verb again, and don't even get me started on adverbs. And then I always have to sing parts of Schoolhouse Rock in order to remember what adjectives are. So French just really kind of brought home how haphazard some of my earlier education was. And so I never felt confident in French because I just didn't have the English even to really do well in French. And of course, when you're in college, like I am a very type A person. And so I care very much about achieving well in school. And so I was always very conscious of the fact that my lack of understanding in French could mean poor grades, which would then bring down my GPA. And I was convinced that would mean that my life would end. I'm also very dramatic. So there's also a part of me that like I would love to explore language a little bit more now that, you know, there's no grades associated with it, because I really do think that some of that kind of screws people over in terms of learning at their own pace and learning in a way that makes sense for them if they're concerned about how it's going to impact their future in a negative way. After I took French for a year, despite the fact that I was terrible at French, I then moved on to take Arabic for a year. Because my academic study for quite a while was focused on Lebanon. And so I was working on learning Arabic. And interestingly, they would ask me a question in Arabic in class. I would understand what was said, and I would respond in French. So I don't know, my brain is always a step behind, I think. So I took Arabic for a year, and then I took a semester of it when I went to grad school the first time before I dropped out. And it was really a struggle. I really liked Arabic because it broke away from like taking a language that didn't share an alphabet with English was in a lot of ways really helpful because it just took different types of thinking, and I appreciated that. But I still ran into the same problem of not knowing enough about English and grammar to be able to take the things that we were learning and apply them to Arabic. And now as an adult, I am beginning to work on learning Hebrew better. I know a lot for prayers. I'm Jewish, but I'm wanting to better understand it for Torah and Talmud study. So here is Josefina in her summer outfit. I really love this outfit. It's so, so pretty. And it's perfect timing to put this on her because we are moving into June, so it is a good time to just have this on her so I can go take pictures of her. But she is representing orange. For the yellow of the rainbow, I have Cecile here. She was actually already dressed in this because this is one of my favorite pieces from her collection. So I like to put her in it early so that I can, really enjoy her in it. This may be one of my favorite pieces in her collection, but I do feel that it's important to note that this is actually incredibly cheap feeling. This is not super high quality fabric. I mean, it's fine. It's perfectly fine, but it looks more luxurious than it actually feels. However, as I've said in previous videos, I am less concerned about the actual quality of a piece and more concerned about, does it look good on camera when I take pictures? And Cecile looks lovely in this. So I am perfectly happy with the piece overall. It's adorable. She looks great. And she is yellow for the rainbow. All right, next up, representing green will be Felicity here. Currently, she is in her spring outfit, her pinner apron outfit. And she will, of course, be changing into her writing habit. So while I work on Felicity, the next question in the historical character tag is Samantha. And that question is, have you ever given a doll as a gift? And if you had to pull a doll from your own collection to give to someone, which doll would it be? I think it's easy to take the easiest road out here and pick out your least favorite doll from your collection and say that's the one that you would give away. In which case, honestly, would probably be poor Felicity here. Least favorite, I love all my dolls, but if I had to rank them, Felicity's definitely towards the bottom, which is why she was one of the last historicals I got. So I think that's like the easy road, is to be like, here's my, least favorite doll. That's the doll I would give away. And that's fine. Like, you do you. But I think it's more interesting to think about, when you think about Samantha's story, she gives away this doll that she's named after her mother, that she really, really wanted and was super special and important to her, and she gave it to Nellie. And so that's kind of what the spirit of the question is meant to get to, is, who would be meaningful for you to give away? So first of all, yes, I have given a doll as a gift. Yeah, to my godkids, I've given dolls. I haven't given them an American Girl doll yet. They're still kind of young, and, we're not, their mom and I are not entirely sure how interested in dolls they are and will remain. And their mom is also a little bit uncomfortable with, like, how expensive American Girl dolls are, which, legit. Although, when the American Girl Columbus store closed, their mom contacted me and was like, I'm so sorry, because I know that you were looking forward to someday taking the girls to the store. And I'm like, well, yeah. And she was like, well, maybe we can just road trip to Chicago together, which, was so sweet of her, because, these dolls mean nothing to her, and she's not necessarily invested in getting her kids into American Girl, but she knows that it's important to me and it's a connection I want to make with my godkids. So I thought that was very sweet of her. But I have given her kids some Our Generation dolls, just to, see if they're interested. Like, not everybody's interested in dolls. Girlhood looks very different these days than it did when I was a kid, or when their mom was a kid. And I acknowledge that, and don't want to give them something that they wouldn't actually enjoy. It's not about, like, the amount of money that would be spent for it to do nothing. It's more like, I'd rather turn around and use that money for something they would genuinely like, rather than just make a presumption. I have also given 2 dolls to my mother. I gave my mom her first 2 dolls, Mary Ellen and Yvette, because she would come to the AG store with me. Even before I was collecting, we would go to the AG store just to see what was new AG like. And she would always kind of, stare longingly at Mary Ellen and Mary Ellen's collection, because it's just very nostalgic for her. So I got my mom Mary Ellen 1 year as a gift. And the next year I got her Yvette, because she also really loved Yvette and was, like, deeply invested in me getting Yvette. And I loved Yvette, and I would have gotten Yvette, absolutely. But my mom so clearly loved her that it just made more sense for me to get Yvette for my mother. And then in terms of the dolls that I would give away from my collection, I think the dolls that probably I would be most inclined to give away, and these are also two of my favorite dolls, are Addie and Claudie, because I think that their stories are really important and are good for kids to learn. And I think that using the dolls as a teaching tool may not be what American Girl is focused on so much anymore. Although I think they still do, just to a lesser extent. They are owned by Mattel. Mattel is, not really in the education game. I think American Girl is trying to still do stuff despite being owned by Mattel. So I think that Addie and Claudie have important stories for people to learn. And I think that the dolls can be a good gateway to that educational process. And so I think I would be most inclined, if I had to pick dolls for my collection to give away, it would probably be Addie and Claudie. And that would break my heart, because Addie is my favorite doll, and Claudie is also my favorite doll, or my second favorite doll. Again, like, the order is unsure. But I think that those dolls have such great educational value and are such a good way to help introduce people to topics that they may not be as familiar with, in a way that is less immediately threatening in some ways. You can feel how you want about that, but it is still important to not scare people away immediately from topics that are important and necessary to learn about. And I think that they would be good in that way. So here we have Felicity. Which way is this supposed to go? I don't know tricorns, okay? Like, maybe like this? Yeah, like this. Get her feather in the front. Here is Felicity in her riding habit, representing green in the rainbow, and a very nice green. What? We need more of this color. We need more of this color. It would be lovely. But here she is. Here we have Addie, who will be representing the blue color. Currently, she is in her birthday outfit, which is one of my absolute favorite outfits of all time. I love her snood. It's just so cool. It's a pain in the butt to get on. There are like 4 bobby pins in here to hold this perfectly in place. But I do love this outfit. And while I work on Addie, I will next answer the Felicity question, which is, what is something missing from the historical books that you wish AG would address? So I chose this to represent Felicity's question because I was having a conversation with Christy from AG Takes Over the other day because she's reading the Felicity books right now. And I'm not gonna like take away anything that she said because she might want to address it in her own space at some point. But we were talking about the things that the Felicity books did not do well, like at all, just did not handle well. And it made me think about, what are other things that AG either hasn't done at all or glossed over and chose to ignore because they weren't ready for it or didn't, for whatever reason chose not to deal with it. And so that's why I wanted this one to be Felicity's question. So other than the stuff that's missing from Felicity's books, which again, I'm not going to get into just in case Christy wants to do something about that at some point. I have no idea, but I don't want to take away anything from her channel. But I would say, to me, it remains a huge, huge gap that there is only one Asian American historical character, and that character isn't even a focus of the stories. Ivy is wonderful, but she really is, she's a best friend character who shows up in some books and, does some stuff, but is never like the focal point. And so I think that's really messed up, and they should definitely try and explore that in some way. The fact that we have a 30-year gap between Addie and Samantha, where lots of history was happening, lots of really important history was happening, and we don't have any dolls from that era to help explore that history is, I think, a pretty major gap. I don't know, because of some of the ups and downs of how American Girl has done with some topics, I don't know how I would feel, in all honesty, about American Girl trying to do something with Reconstruction and the things that happened during Reconstruction. But I think, to me, a major gap in a lot of people's education is Reconstruction. I think a lot of people don't realize that we didn't just go straight from slavery into Jim Crow, that there was a period here of progress and tension and struggle. And I think that would be, I have seen it done well in middle grade books, and I've seen it done well in YA books. So I would presume on some level there could be exploration of Reconstruction in an American Girl children's book. But again, because of some of the messiness of AG when it comes to writing these stories, this would be like something where I'd be like, I'd love to explore this with an extensive advisory board, endless advisory board. Another thing that is obviously a gap is with the 90s twins. Savvy, what's her channel name? Savvy Writes Books, I think, maybe, did a nice breakdown about her frustrations with the 90s twins story, and that it's really focused on, brands and products and things from the era when, they mention that there's concern about, disruption because of the World Trade Organization in Seattle. And they, Y2K is obviously a big focus, but there was other stuff happening in the 90s that they could have explored and they just didn't. And I don't necessarily agree 100% with the analysis that, Savvy presented, but I do think she has a good point that they don't explore some of the big looming things. They do Y2K, but there were some other things happening at that time in Seattle that would have been interesting to explore. And it's so odd to me because, you know, we have Claudie came out before the twins, and those books do a great job of exploring of historical things. And then before that, you know, we had Courtney, and Courtney's books do an amazing job of exploring really tough topics and upsetting things that are very real lived history for people. And then the twins, you know, just don't really have a lot of that. They have Y2K, which was a huge, huge deal. I mean, a lot of younger people very much dismiss Y2K. They're like, whatever, like nothing happened. And it's like, you have no idea how much work went into making sure that nothing happened. This was a very real concern. This was a very real fear. So, you know, I think that the Y2K thing is done well, but I really wish the twins would get a frickin' second book, and that there would be maybe some more stuff explored in there. Now, obviously, the 90s twins don't work super great if they get a second book, because now it's 2000. But, you know, I still think that there's room to explore there. And I would love to see, you know, again, AG is not really focused on the historical line anymore. They are moving away from being a strongly educational brand into being a toy brand. But I think that I would love to see more of the Nanea Molly situations where two girls share an era but have radically different experiences based on who they are and where they live, because I think that's also an important element of history for young girls to understand and explore, young children. But, you know, the brand was originally thought of for girls and explore girls' stories very specifically. But, like, the idea that you can have a very, very different experience from someone even 2 blocks away, I think is something that would be really well done to explore and understand. And obviously a lot of the historical books do a good job of looking at that, because they have, you know, they have Samantha and then they have Nellie, and those are 2 very different experiences. They have Addie and they have Harriet, who have 2 very different experiences. But I think it'd still be cool to see some generation, some era sharing. And with that ramble, here is Addie in her kite flying dress, in her flower picking dress, in her blue dress, whatever you want to call it. Here she is representing blue, because this is just such a lovely dress. So pretty. So pretty. I promise my answers will get shorter because I have 4 more questions to answer and only 3 dolls left to dress. 2 dolls. Only 2 dolls left to dress. Shoot. All right, next in the questions is the Addie question, which is, if you could change something in the world to make it better, what would you choose? And I am taking this more of the spirit of, if you could choose one thing to change. You know, there's so much, right? Like there's so much that, you know, one could focus on. But I think for me, my answer to this question is, if I could change one thing, it would be, I would make people more curious. I think sometimes some of the situations we find ourselves in are from a lack of curiosity and a lack of interest in others and wanting to understand why people think and believe and feel the way they do. A lack of understanding of history and how things came together. And so I guess for me, if I could change one thing, it would be, I would make people more curious. I thought about going with compassionate, but I wanted to start with curiosity, because I think curiosity can lead to compassion. So, having now at least gotten slightly caught up on questions, I'm going to be changing Rebecca here out of her summer outfit, grail outfit that I got recently that I am just obsessed with. I love this. And yes, I could keep her in this for the color indigo, because she's going to be doing indigo for me. But I spent way too long trying to figure out what the difference between indigo and violet are. Still don't really have a good answer. Still don't really understand. So I'm just chucking her in her school outfit and saying, look, it's the bridge between Addie's light blue and the final color of violet. So that is what we're going to do next. And then the question for Josefina is, have your dolls brought you any healing? Obviously selected because Josefina is a healer. Addie's question, by the way, was selected because Addie's question needed to be serious in some way, and because it would just be disrespectful to her books to like give it a little faffy question. But I was thinking a lot about her stories, and a lot of her stories are about exploring changes in the world and how to make the world a better place and how freedom isn't free. And so things along those lines. So that's how that question came up. Josefina's question is because she wants to be a healer. And so yes, I would say my dolls have brought me healing. I have actually already told the story of how I got Josefina the day after one of my cats died. It was not a good death. And so I had been planning on getting Josefina that day. We still went and got Josefina, and it was just incredibly meaningful while dealing with the grief of losing our cat in our not great way, to have this doll who represents healing. I would also say that my 112 Carnes, she's right here in the orange. She's a little healing for me. She's my comfort doll. She's my chronic illness girly who, like, we share that together, and so she's my comfort doll. And so I really like to be with her and spend time with her when I'm not feeling well and when I'm actively sick. All right, so second to last question that I have put into this tag, which again, I left a lot of dolls undone, so that if other people want to take this and expand on it, they absolutely can. Next question is Kit. And it is, if you could write a historical mystery or commission someone to write a historical mystery, if you're not into that kind of thing, which character would you focus it on? And do you have any thoughts on the subject? And so, yes, I have lots of thoughts on this. I would want it to be a Claudie mystery, because Claudie doesn't have any. And I would want it to focus on Idlewild, which is a resort in Michigan that was founded in 1915, I think. And it was a resort for Black Americans because Jim Crow and segregation meant that lots and lots of places were not open to Black Americans. Idlewild was specifically a resort for Black folks. And it's really cool. It's located in Michigan. And from like Madam C.J. Walker had property there. Lots of jazz singers would perform at Idlewild. I mean, it's this really cool place with a lot of history that I think a lot of people know nothing about. And so I would love to see a mystery where Claudie travels to Idlewild. You can bring back in, elements of the Green Book, because I believe it was listed in the Green Book. I don't know if in the 20s it would have been, because the heyday of Idlewild was really the 20s through the 50s. That was kind of like when it was really big. But I would have Claudie travel to Idlewild and, I don't know, do something there. Some sort of mystery would need to be solved. However, there would be a second part. And the second part would be a Melody mystery also taking place in Idlewild. Because when desegregation happened, when segregation became illegal, and with the passing of the Civil Rights Act, Idlewild actually began to fall out of favor and in decline, because now that more places were open to Black Americans, they didn't need Idlewild anymore. And so it began to decline. It's currently experiencing a little bit of a renewal, from what I've read. But I would love to see Melody go to Idlewild in the first years as it starts to like decline. So it's not in full decline or anything. It's not like it was completely abandoned. But have her go, and it'd be so cool. Now that American Girl is exploring connecting people through stories, let Melody meet Claudie. Let Melody meet Claudie. Let Melody have this mystery that she needs to solve, and she ends up having to talk to this 50-year-old woman who's vacationing at Idlewild, and it turns out that this woman, who's helping her with the mystery because she had a mystery when she was a kid, it turns out to be an adult Claudie. I just think that would be so cool. Idlewild is in Michigan, so it makes sense that a Melody would go there, even if it started to be in decline. It was very popular among working and middle class Black Americans. So more people need to know about Idlewild, okay? This is my bugaboo, is it is such a fascinating piece of history that so few people know about. And I mean, by so few people, I just mean the mainstream. Lots of people know about Idlewild. Come on, I'm not an idiot. But I would love to see it be more well known among mainstream culture. All right, I'm not going to deal with trying to get her boots on and tights on right now, but here is Rebecca. She is going to represent indigo. Is this indigo? No, I don't think so. It's blue, but like the spectrum between blue and violet is like, you can't even see it in the rainbow half of the time anyway. So Rebecca will be here to just be representing, if not perfectly, the color of indigo. All right, and the final doll who will be representing in my rainbow to celebrate for Pride is Kaya here, and I'll be changing her out of this and into one of her fancy shawl outfits. It's not a perfect violet representation, but it'll work. It'll do. And appropriately, the last question of the tag is the Kaya question. And Kaya's stories, are wild. If you have not read Kaya's stories, they are absolutely wild. There is so much that happens in them. There was a poll on Tumblr recently about like, hey, after Addie, who would you say is the most traumatized American girl? And Kaya won by quite a lot. Because, if you haven't read her stories, you should go read her stories. But her stories feature a lot of, Kaya's a very brave girl. She does a lot of things. And then she also has a mentor who also like is this incredibly brave person. So her question and the final question of the tag is, what is the bravest thing you have ever done? Bravery comes in a lot of forms. Maybe you have done something, super heroic and sorry, I thought I just ripped her skirt. No. There was Velcro. There was Velcro that I was not paying attention to. Maybe you've done something heroic and awesome in your life. I haven't. And so for me, I think that I can really pinpoint like two brave things that I feel like I have done in my life. And the first was I left my hometown to go to the aforementioned art school. The school was in Detroit. I actually grew up in a really rural farm town in Michigan. And so I would have to travel an hour each way to go to high school. And this was, obviously anytime that you're leaving everything that you know behind, that is incredibly brave. Like whether it's, moving out of a home for the first time, going to a different state, just going somewhere new and different that isn't what you're familiar with. I think that's always very brave. And especially like for me doing it when I was that young, I think it was a relatively brave thing to do, all things considered. And it was deeply meaningful to me because it got me out of a lot of the bubbles that I was living in. When you grow up in a town that's really small and rural and is all white, basically, and queerness is used as a slur and a bad thing, and then you go to an arts high school in Detroit where you're suddenly in the racial minority, and you meet trans people and you meet queer people and you encounter all these new identities and experiences in life that are just so far beyond what were familiar with. I think that's a very brave thing for anybody to do. It was deeply meaningful for me. It taught me a lot. I made some really wonderful friends in my time at that high school. It was not a perfect situation. No high school situation ever is going to be utterly perfect. But it meant a lot to me. And then the other brave thing that I think I have done is more on a very personal level, just frankly giving my partner the time of day, like allowing him, like getting over myself enough to explore the possibility of dating him was very brave of me. I was not in a good place when I met him, and I did a lot to see if it was worth it. And, I pushed him away a lot more than I probably, should have realistically, because I was scared and it was not something that I was excited to do per se. Not in the sense that, he should have given me space and he was too pushy, blah, blah, blah. But like, we started dating and I immediately was like, hello, therapy, let's begin. So like that should tell you like where I was mentally at the time. And so I think that opening myself up and letting myself be vulnerable was a very brave thing to do. And so those are things that I think people sometimes forget about, are very brave things, like making yourself vulnerable, trying new things, leaving things behind that are familiar and comfortable. Those are all incredibly brave things to do. And if you have ever done any of those, you're an incredibly brave person too. So you have done hard things. You will do hard things again. You can get through anything. And with that, Kaya, again, I'm not bothering with her shoes just yet because there's like 1,000 ties and laces. But Kaya here is representing Violet in my rainbow. I think she looks very cute in this outfit. I didn't put the shawl on with her fancy shawl outfit because the shawl is red and has beautiful rainbow fringe. So that's actually perfect. But I wanted her to be able to more represent the violet and not the red. All right, here is my little rainbow. There they are. All the girls dressed in rainbow colors for Pride. All right, and that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please feel free to do the tag if you so desire. I can't really imagine that it's something that anybody would be interested in because it's very weird and random. Again, I got bored. But if you do, feel free to do it. Feel free to add some of the other historical characters and add your own questions. Please, I hope that you celebrate Pride this month in whatever way feels right for you. Maybe you go to festivals, maybe you make crafts, maybe you promote queer voices online, whatever works best for you. Like I don't go to any of the big festivities because my anxiety is like, oh heck no. So that is not something that works for me. But dressing my dolls for Pride was something that I could do to celebrate this year. So I hope you find some way to celebrate. No matter what's going on outside right now, we should still be able to celebrate and find ways to find joy in our lives. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe should you so desire. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye!